Hello, and welcome to Real Menopause Talk. My guest today is Benvon Crumpler. She tells us of her deeply intense years of perimenopause when she was entirely unaware of what was happening to her. She felt like she was genuinely losing her mind and became so ill she even feared she was dying. When she finally sought help, the doctor discovered the complete lack of estrogen in her body, and she was able to come back to herself, her life, and her family. We met up so I could hear more.
Hi.
Hi, Ben.
Hello. How are you?
Very well, thank you. How are you? Lovely to meet you.
And you?
I would love to know a bit about your background and whereabouts you are on this whole perimenopause, menopause roller coaster.
Yeah, it's an interesting question because I've never really considered how long it's been really. But giving it a little bit of thought this morning, I would say I was probably about 46 when things started, and I'm now 53. I'm through it. I am on the other side. In fact, I don't know what the terminology is, but either way, I'm out the door, firmly in I suppose the right word is post-menopause. I'm not really sure about the phraseology, but that's where I am now. But it has been a roller coaster of a journey. And I have to be honest, the reason I was interested in doing this for you is because I think I spent many years completely sort of unaware of what it was all about, not even engaging in, I'm not sure there was anything to read, but I almost didn't sort of reach out to talk about it with anybody particularly, or I didn't really know what was going on. I just thought I was losing my mind, which maybe there was a degree of that going on as well. But I think a lot of it was driven or underpinned by what was about to happen or what I was going through. So yeah, I would say it's been a 6 or 7 year journey.
Unfortunately, quite standard in terms of length.
Okay.
Normal length, give or take, we're supposed to expect between 8 and 12 years.
Okay.
However, it sounds like you've had quite an intense 6 or 7 years.
Yeah, I think it is. And now I'm at the sort of really positive end of the experience now, meaning that the crisis, I would say, happened earlier this year. And I actually did think I was having a breakdown. I literally thought this is a breakdown. This is what a nervous breakdown is. You know, it has to be. I'm crying. I lost about 1.5 stones in weight very, very quickly, which was created by stress, which turned out to be the moral of the story. I just rock bottom estrogen. I had none in my body. And it wasn't until I went to the GP saying, I'm dying. You have to help me. I think I've got cancer. Why am I losing weight like this? What's going on? And her being very calm and saying, well, let's just start with, the basics of having a blood test. And, cut a long story short, the outcome was all my other markers were fine, but I just didn't have any estrogen. And I was like, oh, okay, what do I do now? And, she happened to be amazing. I was so fortunate. I realise now, having talked about this quite a lot, I was super lucky with the GP I landed with that day, who did know me a bit, but I've never spent years at the GP, so no one knows me that well. I've been luckily healthy generally and not having to spend much time in the GP surgery. So I just happened to land lucky. And she told me her story. Whilst I sobbed my heart out, I actually wasn't dying at that particular moment, which is obviously what I thought I was what she was going to tell me. And I was going through something very normal. And when she told me her funny stories about her lead up to taking HRT, which is sort of where I've ended up, I was like, wow, okay, it can create all of this monster of thinking I was literally losing my mind. And within a month of having taken, I'd say a month, maybe even faster, I was calmer. Everything just came back into perspective of, okay, I feel more me. The me I'd forgotten was even me. It was like a miracle, sort of a miracle gel. I'm not sure if I needed to know before. I just didn't need to get to the rock bottom point that I got to, because I had no real idea that all of those symptoms were predominantly, I should say, because I don't think you can lay everything at its door, were predominantly driven by what my hormones were doing.
And what were your overriding symptoms?
In that sort of lead up to finding myself in her clinic, I suppose, unbelievable stress, unbelievable nervous energy. So I had heart palpitations, I couldn't sleep, crying all the time. I couldn't focus on anything. I thought I was useless, pathetic, hopeless, couldn't do any work. And I had come on the back of a really tough pandemic year. Hence why I say there are other factors, I think, that were probably contributing. I didn't have any income, and that was very stressful. And I didn't, there were lots of things that were sort of building up. But fundamentally, those things came to a crash and burn in probably February. I had a project to do. I just had no confidence. I felt just shocking, and put it down just to the stress of trying to reinvent myself, etc., with work. But then when the weight started falling off, I was like, okay, this is actually now, it's a dream really, because I wasn't even sort of doing it. I was like, oh, this is fabulous. And then I realized, like, this is now not fabulous. What's going on? Something very strange is happening to my body. So I was probably in that period for about 12 weeks before I did anything about it.
12 weeks at the rock bottom stage.
At the rock bottom stage, I can't go on. I don't know what I'm doing, not sleeping. I'd be going to bed for maybe 3 hours a night. I'd be in the garden at 5 a.m, pacing up and down. And then the more tired I became, the more obviously out of proportion everything was. And I was also panicking over work. So I was very unproductive because I was so tired and I was so stressed. It was this sort of combination of factors. And then I just assumed, as I said, I assumed I was very ill and very scared. I was super scared. When I went to the GP, I couldn't speak because I was crying so much, saying terrified that I was dying. I mean, I'm not, it's funny now, and the day will come probably when I will have that moment, but it wasn't then. And I did not need to be in that position. And I think that's what I would love other women to know, when you realize you're really changing, noticing, and just know what to know what is changing. But, my journey went right back to sort of age 46. And the funny side is it all started with sort of the obvious symptoms like hot flushes in work, having to take off various layers. I had mainly male counterparts. And I was only telling the story recently to someone sitting in an office with two quite good looking males who were my senior to me, and just taking off one layer after another in this very tiny office and thinking, oh my God, what's going on? But didn't really even know about the hot flush thing. So by the end of it, I'm sitting in a vest whilst they've got full jumper and winter clothing on. And I think they were more embarrassed than I was, but I was like, what's going on? And also just a massive crush. I realized I had a massive crush on somebody at work, which is hilarious. And I thought that was also just a midlife crisis. I realized a year, and I think once I hit the menopause, I said, oh, that infatuation was just nature going, okay, that's what we're going to do before you conk out. That literally was a very, very funny period of my life, because I was, Mother Nature was just doing her thing, looking for a younger model, I think, and just like, wow. And it's so funny to look back, because it was totally driven by what was going on in my body, as opposed to, there's just no way I would have under normal circumstances, that particular person would have been the object of my desire. Only in hindsight do you note these funny events, which were all part of the journey.
Going back a tiny bit then, Ben, what is it that you did do or currently do for a living?
So up to age 50, I worked in the entertainment industry, so predominantly marketing and brand development. So I worked in television business, and then latterly in kind of the leisure industry. So I always had a pretty full-on job, and I travelled a lot, and I had 3 children. I still have, luckily, 3 children. So I'd had sort of a very busy, and I would say it's quite stressful post-40 career, because I think as I got older, I also felt like I slowed down. I felt the pressure a lot at work to keep performing, to, just to keep up, actually. I finished that kind of part of my life age 50, and then I had to reinvent myself as a sort of consultant. And I did that for a year or so, and then we hit COVID. And then I very fortunately kind of reinvented myself again. And I'm now a COO for a small company, and I'm working for a founder. You may know it's 2 to 3 days, which is essentially a recruitment platform for highly capable professional women who want to work flexibly. Women like myself and many others who reach a point where corporate life is no longer a place that they want to be because of it's aggressive, and it doesn't lend itself actually to responsibilities you have. You sort of make it work when you've got young children because one, you're younger and more, nimble and able. But actually then when you get to an older, you might be caring for someone, or you might just want to take more time. And corporates, they're not very good at flexibility. So a lot of senior women leave, they do leave, and they leave for the reasons you've also touched on, which is lack of confidence, self-belief, which absolutely comes with the menopause. Because you mentioned the word anxiety, and I think that's absolutely a key factor that has underpinned all of my journey, just feeling a bit useless and pointless and ignored, and just worrying about it. Just worry, a lot of worry, a lot of really unnecessary worry, actually. But so 2 to 3 days is trying to champion the women, but also to support employers to find these women and say, you can do it differently. You don't need to, first of all, always hire very young people. And secondly, you should be looking after women per se, because there is an amazing talent pool and they shouldn't be ignored.
Did your perimenopause then have an impact on your choices to reinvent yourself?
In hindsight, I would say yes. I think because effectively in the marketing industry, which by its very nature tends to be a younger demographic, really, not necessarily people running the teams, but as digital's become so prevalent in everyone's lives, it does tend to sort of push out the older generation who maybe aren't digitally native, or you've got to really, really love it, to learn it. And I think I realized I just didn't really love it. And I'd had a great career and I'd had a great time, and I'd loved the people I'd worked with and the products I'd worked on and brands I'd worked on. But it was definitely a time to sort of go, okay, what's the next chapter? And be a bit more holistic about the way I looked at life. Like, okay, well, I'm halfway through now. If I'm lucky, I'm, probably tip the other side. So what is it I really want to do? And I think my drive was to be a bit more purposeful, do something that meant I was just helping just sounds so crass, but just contributing in a way that was more meaningful than just making money for a big corporation. I also found I got a lot bullshit, and I partly bullshit at home, but also bullshit at work. I just had enough of the politics, and I'd had enough of being sort of pushed around in a way. And I thought, it's just not work. It's not working for me anymore. And I don't think I was working for them really in the end. So I think in hindsight, it did contribute to a change for sure. Like a change, I suppose your body's changing, but also your outlook changes. And I can now wholeheartedly say it's for the better, but I've definitely been through a journey on that it's for the better. And I think I've realized that loss of identity that comes with being younger and being even funny things. And I think I've said this to a few people, but that I remember the day I stopped being noticed. And I mean that by all genders, to be honest, but I could sort of remember I became invisible. And it was absolutely the beginning of this sort of 46, 47 years old where I was perimenopause and didn't know it. I can see the only people that look at me now are 80 years plus, and that's normally because they're probably not even looking at me at all. And we know to have a laugh with mates about it and saying, when did I become invisible? Well, clearly it's happened. I found that really difficult. That's a very physical thing, I suppose, meaning you're not noted for your externalness. I'm not bothered about that, but at the time it really bothered me. I thought, oh my God, everything's sort of changing. What's going on? I don't like this. Another adjustment.
Yes, and one that is universal. It feels very much that it is universal.
It's a really real thing. I think all of these things contribute to your self-esteem, and your body changes clearly, and the menopause has contributed to that, whether it's dry skin or your hair changes, your eyelashes drop out. Like I said, my pride and glory has always been my hair. and my eyelashes, just because they were naturally lots of them. And now it's like I've sort of got grass for hair or hay for hair, and my eyelashes are sort of pretty much gone. So, I mean, that's maybe a little exaggeration, but for me, and they were things that were natural to me and have now left me. They're tiny things, I know, but they are all factors which make you feel less valuable, I suppose, and to the point, less noticed and just less attractive, I suppose. The gift of the menopause is almost like everything sort of says, well, your job's done here, thank you. You've helped contribute to the future planet, and the inhabitants, and on your bike now and get into a box and die, which I suppose, going back to where we started about mothers, was sort of what happened. My memory of my mother, she had a hysterectomy in her 40s, so she didn't go through the menopause as such. So I didn't have that sort of yardstick, I suppose, to sort of say, oh, when's it going to happen to me? And also it wasn't discussed. She went on HRT, then she came off HRT because it was dangerous, or perceived to be dangerous. And then nothing was ever mentioned again. Without doubt, with having daughters, and indeed for men, I have a son, I'd like him to be knowledgeable. I think it's really, really important that it's made as palatable as any other topic that we discuss, and not to make it embarrassing for others, because ultimately it is connected with physiology, and it is connected with reproduction, and it is connected. These are issues that not every man or woman or female is comfortable talking about. So I think for me, the way it will improve is when it's normalized, and it's just felt like any other chat that you would have over a dinner party or over a coffee or on the bus. And that would be a great place for it to get to. And for men, sadly, men do probably need to understand it a bit better, but I think they are curious, and they've had to live with, in some cases, not all cases, obviously, because not all men live with women, but, if they have a partner who's female, they will have gone through some sort of battering themselves, I think. And my husband definitely did. I was horrible, really horrible, grumpy and spiteful and short-tempered, and flew off the handle a lot. I mean, even the children will say, God, Mum, do you remember he used to just really shout, like all the time? I was like, oh, God, really? Did I? Yeah, I kind of remember that. I mean, I'm feisty anyway, so I can't blame it. But that's mellowed hugely now. I'm much more mild-mannered, but I was angry.
Again, it seems to be a very familiar symptom for many people. It's just so hard to identify when you're right in the eye of the storm.
Yeah.
12 weeks is a long time to feel at your very, very, very lowest ebb. Yeah, when was the light bulb to do anything? Did your family suggest? Did they support? Help?
No, they did. My husband, who's very mild-mannered and there's no crisis goes on with him. You could literally be losing your limbs, and he'd say, I think you're okay, aren't you? Because that's the way he goes through life. But I think when he saw the state of me and I said, I'm losing my mind, and I think I've got something seriously wrong with me, and I'm terrified. When he saw me, I think at that most vulnerable point, which makes me feel really sort of, emotional thinking about it. I was really, really terrified. And that's when he said, I think you've really got to go and see the GP. Come on, it's just do it, because it's the beginning of whatever it is. Find out. Just the more you know, then we can start dealing with it. And I think he was very scared. I think he was actually really scared because he thought it was something bigger. And actually the GP was amazing, because when she actioned my bloods very, very quickly, meaning I got a call the next day, and I said, oh my God, she does think it's really urgent. She obviously thinks I'm very, very ill. And he said, look, just stop sort of, just catastrophizing. That's the word I'm looking for. Everything was a catastrophe. And I think that's probably quite hard to cope with. He was the one that pushed me finally. Whether it was to save me or to save him, I'm not really sure. But I think he could see I was in a very dark place. I should also mention that insomnia is not something I can blame fully on the menopause. I've suffered from insomnia for maybe 12, maybe 13 or so years. Since my father died, actually, that was a trigger for me. And it's gone in patches. But, without doubt, it's been a big factor in the last 6 or 7 years. It's sort of almost become my identity. And I'm not sure that HRT particularly helped that, but what has helped it is cutting right back on alcohol. And that's really, really improved. It's improved massively. It's improved the night sweat. It's improved a lot of things. So, and I sleep for longer and I sleep deeper. So I should have got there quicker. But actually, and I should talk about alcohol, so I think it's quite important. I was using it as a crutch at that point when I felt so dreadful. So it was like a sort of shut down from one mode to another. And so what I suppose naively or I ignored is I was actually making my symptoms worse, for sure. I know that now. And I just don't know if I didn't really want to know it then, because it was like an emergency SOS. But, again, in a calmer light of day, I do rub on, estrogen every day. I can see so much more clearly. I can think better. I'm not saying I think brilliantly anymore, and I definitely still have a fog, and we all have a laugh about the words we can't remember. I mean, I've even forgotten my friends' children's names at times when I've known them for half my life. Like, you just won't come to me. And then that does make what you feel incredibly, I'm going to say old as a sort of generic term, but it does. It's like, come on, is my memory really going? Well, it does. Yeah, I think it is.
Have you made any other lifestyle changes?
Yeah, I take, and I've been doing it for some time, magnesium, I take vitamin B. Those two are sort of they're part of my routine. I mean, I eat fairly well anyway, and I'm pretty much vegetarian, a bit of fish here and there. So that I haven't really changed my diet particularly, I would say. But I have done a lot more yoga than I ever did. In fact, I didn't used to do yoga, so it's a fairly new addition to my life. And that has helped a lot. I'm not a yogi. I'm not there all the time. I'm not doing it every morning when I get out of bed. I suddenly haven't had a revelation. I'm just building it into my life. And without doubt, it's a benefit. So I'd say that's a fairly new addition, which I can tick. There's still things I do which I shouldn't do to help sleep. I still look at my phone before I go to bed. I can't evangelize. I've left I've detoxed digitally. But I think, the reducing alcohol, the supplements, and the sort of introduction of yoga and just sort of being more aware of breathing. So when I was going through that height of anxiety, my heart palpitations were off the scale. So I sort of invested in, good old headspace and thought, okay, I've just got to do some things that make me more aware of myself. I dabbled in it. I don't do it all the time, but I suppose I'm just more switched on to it now.
How would you like to prepare your daughters and your son?
Mm-hmm. I think I've started that journey to a degree by just dropping it into conversation every so often. I mean, I have 2 girls who are at the beginning of that's a sort of interesting thing. And I think it's happened to other women I know, where you end your sort of natural cycle as they begin. And there's something really lovely about, there's a tinge with sadness, but it's also really lovely. It's predominantly lovely because they're about to go on this journey that you've been on, and hopefully one day, if they want to have children, that will be a gift that they will have. So I think just being as open as possible. I pretty much say what I think, so I don't dress anything up too much with them. They also saw me in a really bad way. They know I take HRT. They just see me rubbing it on every day, and they're like, oh, what's that? So just answering the questions. Mm-hmm. My son may be a little different because he's 20 and I'm not sure he wants to hear about his mother's menopausal symptoms, quite frankly. But again, I think just being able to be free about it and just make sure that they could always ask anything. That I've always sort of encouraged them to ask anything that they want. And maybe, it would probably be helpful if my partner also kind of we could make light of it, because I think that's the important thing. It doesn't need to be so serious or so medicalized. And I think helping people understand the moods and that it's not actually, you're not being a horrible person, even though you clearly feel like you are. I think if they'd understood more earlier on, or I'd have been able to phrase it better instead of just being angry, I think everybody would have benefited. But of course, I'm doing all this post the event, really. And they probably think I'm a much nicer mum as a than I was.
At least you've got there. I think that's terrific.
Yeah, no, I've definitely got there. It's been a long journey. It really, really has. But I have got there, and I sort of understand it better now. And not just understanding, but just as we're doing, just talking about it. And it is amazing the number of women that have asked me. I'm not at the school gates anymore, so I don't have that community. But just, a few mates locally, and say, God, do you know any, I'm going through this, or I think I'm going through the menopause. Do you know anyone could help me? Or have you seen it? How was your GP? And I've been evangelizing about my GP. I said, you just, first of all, only see someone female, because I don't think medically they've been given enough training or insights. And I've heard some horrific stories, just hearsay from male GPs going back, over the years. Actually, people are telling their stories now, saying I was kind of booted out of the GP. He told me to go away and get a grip, or, there was nothing wrong with me, and et cetera, et cetera. So I think the talking about it is really brilliant. And I think that will help us all the more we do that and make it feel just another part of life. Everyone talks about pregnancy openly, and that men and women, in fact, and it's something you can talk about at the water cooler as well as at a dinner party. But I guess the menopause is sort of still seen as, I think, something quite embarrassing for men particularly, and I think embarrassing possibly for women as well, because they just think, what am I going through? What is wrong with me? It being something you can just have a chat about and ask about. I mean, if you're curious, is that something, can I, or is it okay to, or is it safe to, or, ask these questions. And I think the more light we can make of it, the easier it will ultimately be. The symptoms are so far reaching, aren't they? From attention span to memory to anxiety to libido to weight. And that will be another point. I have found, outside of that instance I spoke about, I found it very hard to lose weight. Over the sort of few years you put on a few pounds, it's very difficult to shift. Whereas before I could just, I wouldn't say ping back, but, have a good few weeks and it would be easier. Mm-hmm. So that is a change that's, unfortunate, I think. You feel more sort of, not sluggish so much, but just it seems to hang around more than it used to.
Ben, thank you so much for all your time and for talking to everybody who's listening. Anything that you would like to add?
Bring it on, in the sense of not being scared of it. Ask questions, find an ally, have a menopause ally. And the wonder of the internet is there is heaps out there, but it's not well curated, I would say. So I think ask a friend, ask someone who's gone through it, and you'd be surprised, I think, the amount of sort of goodwill that there is in the female community to help somebody out and help you understand it better and talk about personal experiences. So lean on someone if you think you are experiencing any of the symptoms, which are, as we've said, far ranging and very different for every individual. But ask a friend.
Fantastic. Thank you.
You're welcome. Lovely to meet you.
Take care. You too.
Bye.
If you would like to share your experience of menopause, please drop me an email to hattie@realmenopausetalk.com. It's always lovely to hear from you. A shout out to our partners Hello Day, the seasonal vegan supplement company, and remember to use code RMTPodcast for 15% off, free delivery and a tote bag when you shop through our website realmenopausetalk.com. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.